The curtain moved. It did not fly open dramatically. It did not rip from its rail. It slid, with a deliberate and unhurried smoothness, the way a man with complete control of a room moves, when he wants everyone in it to understand that the control has always been his. One hand appeared first, dark jacket sleeve, the cufflink that Zara had given him on their 3rd anniversary. The one with the small jade inset that she had chosen because someone told her jade meant protection, and she had believed, back then, that you could protect a man like Jae-min Kwon with a stone that cost less than his lighter. Then he stepped out fully into the room. He was dressed as though he had come directly from a board meeting that the board had not known was happening. His jacket was unrumpled. His expression was nothing. Not blank in the way of a man suppressing emotion, but empty in the way of a man who had made a decision about which emotions served him, and had filed the rest away somewhere very deep, very long ago. He stood still for a moment in the space between the curtain and the wall, and he looked at his mother and his brother and his family's lawyer, and he said nothing at all. The silence he brought with him was a different quality from any of the silences that had come before it. The earlier silences had been reactive. The silence of shock, the silence of calculation, the silence of people deciding how to recover from something unexpected. This silence was active. It had intention. It pushed against the walls of the room, and it had weight that Zara, even from the bed, could feel pressing against her sternum with the same precise discomfort as her fractured ribs. Dae-hyun had not moved since the slow clap. He was still standing beside the bed, with his face arranged in an expression of disbelief that was losing, rapidly, to something that looked very much like fear. He had grown up watching his older brother perform this specific kind of stillness, and he had never, in 34 years, found a way to be comfortable in the presence of it. Madame Kwon recovered first. She always did. She had been recovering from things her entire life. From the deaths of allies, from the loss of the chairman, from the slow erosion of influence she had once held so completely that she had confused it with a permanent state. She straightened. She lifted her chin. She looked at her older son with the look she had been using on him since childhood. The one designed to communicate disappointment at a frequency that bypassed the mind and struck somewhere more tender. "Jae-min," she said. Her voice was controlled. "You were in Busan." "I was not in Busan," he said. 3 words. Very quiet. The quieter Jae-min spoke, the more carefully the world around him listened. And this was something he had understood about himself since he was 19 years old, and had spoken very quietly to a man in a shipping office in Incheon. And the man had never raised his voice to anyone. Again. "You told me. I told you what I needed you to believe," he said. He moved further into the room, not toward the bed, not toward his family, just further in, claiming the center of the space the way water claims a container. He glanced at Mr. Choi briefly, the way you glance at a piece of furniture you have already decided to remove. "You can leave those on the table, Mr. Choi. You will not need them again." Mr. Choi did not need to be told twice. He was already closing the briefcase. "Jae-min." Dae-hyun's voice had changed. The performance of confidence was gone. Not fading, but gone. Cleanly, the way a candle goes out. What was left underneath was the voice of a younger brother who had spent his whole life measuring himself against a standard he had never met, and had finally, in this moment, stopped pretending he had ever come close. "Brother, listen. Whatever you think I don't think anything," Jae-min said. "That is the distinction between us. You think, you speculate, you improvise, and then you perform, and then you hope the performance holds." He turned his eyes to Dae-hyun, and held them there with a flatness that was not unkind, but was devastating, precisely because it contained no cruelty, only assessment. "I know. I have known for quite some time." Madame Kwon moved to her younger son's side, not protectively. She was not a woman who moved protectively. She moved the way pieces on a board move, strategically, into positions that represented something. "You are upset," she said. "That is understandable. But Jae-min, you have to see that this situation." "Continue," Jae-min said. She stopped. "I want to hear how my wife dies again," he said. "I want to hear the next part, the part where it becomes the accident everyone is prepared to remember. I am interested in how you planned to phrase it for the records." "Continue." The room held its breath. A door opened and closed somewhere down the corridor. A trolley wheel squeaked past. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary hospital night, indifferent to whatever was happening in this dim room at the end of Wing 4. Daehyun made a decision. It was the wrong decision, as most of Daehyun's decisions had been. But it was the decision his nature had always been building toward, which was to attack when cornered, rather than retreat. He looked at his brother, and he said very clearly, "You were never there for her. You left her alone in that house for months at a time. You treated the marriage like a document you had signed and then filed. Don't come in here acting like a devoted husband. Don't perform grief you don't feel." Jae-min looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not performing anything," he said. "I stopped performing years ago. That was always more your skill than mine." He turned slightly, angled himself toward the bedside table, and pressed a finger against the side of his watch. "A small, precise gesture. I have had access to your accounts since March. Your domestic accounts, your offshore structures, the new entity you incorporated in Singapore in February using a name that is almost but not quite identical to one of ours. The kind of near match that would confuse a compliance officer for long enough to be useful." He paused. "I froze the Singapore entity on Tuesday. The accounts tied to it followed on Wednesday. Your protection arrangements with the Incheon Consortium ended this morning because I called in a debt from a person you don't know I know, and that person was happy to honor the request." Daehyun's face was doing something complicated. "Your arrangement with the man who sold the leasing company's records," Jae-min continued, "was terminated last week, when the man in question was made aware of certain information about Jae-min Kwon's gambling activities in Macau that could, in the wrong hands, create significant complications for him. He chose not to be in the wrong hands. He chose instead to be in mine." "You have no," Daehyun started. "I have everything," Jae-min said. Not with heat, with the simple, tired tone of a man stating a fact he had hoped, once, not to need. "I have had everything since before she was in this bed. I had enough before the accident to know it was coming, and I made an error. I underestimated the schedule. I believed there was more time, and I was wrong about that. And I have been carrying the weight of being wrong about that every single day she has been in this room." The last sentence had a different texture from the rest of what he had said, and it landed differently. Madame Kwon heard it. Daehyun heard it. Zara, lying in the bed with the monitor pulsing beside her, and the IV line still trembling, heard it more than any of them. "You knew," Madame Kwon said, not an accusation, something closer to wonder. The way a woman marvels at a mechanism she underestimated. "You knew before. I suspected for longer than that," he said. "I needed proof." "This is the business we are in, Mother. You know what I need before I move. You taught me that. Suspicion is not enough. Suspicion destroys alliances without cause. I needed the chain, complete, from the instruction to the execution. I needed to know it was not only Daehyun." He looked at her steadily. "I needed to know how far up it went." Silence. Then Madame Kwon said, with a dignity that was almost admirable, "I wanted her gone. I did not want her dead." "The distinction," Jae-min said, "matters more to you than to me right now." He turned away from her. Not dramatically, just a turn. Practical, final, the physical equivalent of a door closing. "Daehyun." He did not look at his brother as he said it, which was its own specific kind of message. "Your position within the organization ends tonight. Not suspended, ended. Your name is removed from every document, every entity, every operational structure by morning. The estate house in Gapyeong, the one registered to you, the one you bought with money that belonged to this family, is being transferred as of tomorrow. You will not be harmed. You will not be pursued. But you will have nothing from this family that you did not come into this world with, which means you will have nothing. If you test that understanding, it will be revised." Daehyun said nothing. He stood in the room that had been, 10 minutes ago, a room he controlled. And he looked like a man who had just discovered that the ground he had spent years building his house on had belonged to someone else all along. "Mother." Now Jae-min looked at Madame Kwon. "The family estate, the Sungbuk residence, your personal accounts, the ones that are yours and not tied to family operations, remain yours. Your monthly allowance will continue, because you are my mother and because I was raised to value that, despite everything. But your involvement in the business, your advisory role, Your access to operational information, that is finished. You will be informed of what you need to be informed of, and nothing else. Is that clear? Madame Kwon looked at her son for a long time. Something passed across her face that was too complicated and too old to name simply. Grief, perhaps, of a specific variety. The grief of a person who shaped something over decades and then watched it turn to face them with exactly the qualities they had put into it. I did what I believed was right for this family, she said. I know, he said. That is the most frightening part. Mr. Choi had been trying to dissolve into the wall behind him for the past several minutes. Jae-min looked at him now, with the brief, clean look of someone concluding a transaction. You're dismissed from the family's legal representation as of now. You will receive severance consistent with your contract. You will not discuss anything that has occurred in your professional relationship with this family, with any person, institution, or authority. You understand what I mean. When I say that, he paused. You may leave. Mr. Choi left. He left so quickly and so quietly that the door barely registered a sound. And then the corridor swallowed him, and he was gone. Dae-hyun looked at his mother. His mother looked at her older son. There was a moment, small, tight, quivering, in which Zara wondered if Dae-hyun would say something that would change the direction of the night. People in corners sometimes say true things. Things too honest and too raw to survive the light of a less desperate moment. But Dae-hyun did not say a true thing. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and he walked out of the room without speaking. And the sound of his footsteps going down the corridor was the sound of a man who had not yet understood that the worst part of his punishment was not what had just been taken from him, but the years ahead in which he would have to wake up knowing what he had done, and that it had been worth nothing. Madame Kwon straightened her jacket. She picked up her handbag. She looked at Zara. A long look, the last look, the look of a woman revising a long-held assessment in the final seconds before she no longer has to hold it. You were never what I wanted for him, she said. I know, Zara said. Her voice was steady. But you were never what I thought you were, either, Madame Kwon said. And then she walked out. And the room became quiet, in the way rooms become quiet, when they have finally been emptied of everything they were holding. Only Jae-min and Zara remained. He stood at the foot of her bed. The lights were still off. The monitor beeped. The IV line had stopped trembling. For a long time, neither of them spoke. There was enough between them, 5 years of marriage, 3 months of increasing distance, 11 days of a hospital room, a curtain, a slow clap, and everything that had come before, all of it. That silence was not an absence of anything. It was full. Zara was the one who spoke first. How long were you going to watch? She said. And her voice was not the careful, measured voice she had used all evening, the instrument she had deployed with such precision. It was her actual voice, the one underneath, smaller, less armored, carrying something that had been waiting to be put down for a very long time. Before deciding I was worth saving, Jae-min did not answer immediately. He looked at her the way he rarely looked at her, without the layer, without the professional flatness, with something honest showing through the gap. I needed the complete chain, he said finally. You said that already. I know. That's not an answer to what I asked. Another silence. Outside, the wind moved against the window. The latch rattled, from the east, as it always did. I underestimated the speed, he said. I believed there was more time. I thought. He stopped. His jaw moved. I thought I could control the edges of it without bringing you into the center. I thought that if I gathered enough, if I had the complete picture, I could remove the threat before it reached you. I was wrong about the timing. I know that. I have known it since the call came in that you were being taken to the hospital. Zara looked at him. You were watching me, she said. For how long? Since February, he said. When I first understood what Dae-hyun was building, I had someone near you, someone you wouldn't have noticed. You were never alone in the way you thought you were alone. That should probably make me feel better. Does it? No, she said truthfully. Because there was still a night when a car went off a road and the person watching was not close enough. She held his gaze. And I lay in this bed for 11 days, carrying something that you had the other half of, and you were behind a curtain. He took a breath. Something in him that was usually held very still moved. I know, he said. I know that. I'm not asking for an apology, she said. I'm not. What this is. I'm asking you to understand that whatever calculation you were running, I was a variable in it, and not a person. And I felt that. And I have felt that before. And I don't know how to keep feeling it, and keep being in this. Jae-min was quiet for a moment. Then he moved. Not toward the door, not toward the chair, but toward the side of the bed. He stood close enough that she could see the small details of him, the line where his collar had pressed against his neck, the slight tension behind his left eye that only appeared when he was holding something very tightly. I am not good at this, he said. I know. The part that you are describing, the being a person rather than a variable. I understand what you mean. I know I have not always. He stopped, tried again. There are things I can control in that world out there. There are very few things I can control in a room with you. I have always responded to the things I cannot control by calculating, she said. Yes. And watching. Yes. And waiting until you have enough information to feel safe. He looked at her. Yes. She said nothing for a moment. The monitor beeped steadily between them. I am not the world out there, she said finally. I never was. No, he said. You were never that. And the way he said it, low and plain and without any performance at all, was the closest thing to an opening that Zara had heard from him in 3 years of a marriage that had been slowly, quietly sealing itself at all the joints. She reached for his hand, not softly, not the tentative reach of someone asking permission. She took his hand the way someone takes something they have already decided belongs to them. If you stand beside me now, she said, and her voice was clear. Don't ever stand behind a curtain again. His hand closed around hers, slowly, the way something that has been held very tightly relaxes, not all at once, but perceptibly. He did not say anything, but he did not let go. Outside. The window. The city was doing what cities do in the deepest part of the night, moving at its quietest frequency, the lights still on in the buildings that never went dark. The streets carrying the sparse traffic of people with reasons to be out in the hours when reasons become necessary, rather than optional. The hospital was an island in the middle of all of it, ordinary and unglamorous, smelling of antiseptic and recycled air. The city lights made shapes on the glass. There was a black car parked across the street. She had noticed it earlier, the third time she had looked out the window this evening, when the shift changed and she had angled herself to check whether the nurse was coming. It had been there then. It was still there now. The engine was off. The windows were dark. It was simply a car parked at night in a city full of parked cars, and it meant nothing. Except that it had not moved in 4 hours, and 4 hours was too long. She said nothing about it yet. Jae-min had moved to stand beside the bed properly now, and she could feel the warmth of him, and the steadiness, which was its own complicated thing, because he was the source of the danger she was in, and also the only architecture she had ever found that could withstand it. And there was no version of that fact that was simple. His phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He took it out, read the screen, and then read it again. His expression did not change, but his hand, still holding hers, tightened slightly. What is it? She asked. He put the phone back in his pocket. He looked at the window. His eyes tracked to the black car across the street and stayed there for 3 seconds with a stillness that told Zara everything. He had already seen it. How long? She said. The car has been there since 10:30, he said. It is not one of mine. Daehan's? No. Daehan's people are settled. This is something else. He looked down at her. His voice was very quiet, very level, carrying the particular calibration of a man delivering information that he has already processed and is now presenting finished rather than raw. There are people in this city who have been watching this family's position for some time. What happened tonight, the consolidation of what I know, the removal of Daehyun and my mother from the operational structure, it changes the balance. Not everyone who observes that change will be indifferent to it. Zara looked at the window, then back at him. So this wasn't the end, she said. No, he said, this was the beginning of the visible part. She absorbed that. The monitor beeped. The IV line was steady. Then we need a different plan, she said. We do, he agreed. Not your plan, she said, ours. He looked at her for a long moment. Then something very close to the edge of an expression, not quite a smile, but its outline, moved briefly across his face. Ours, he said. In the black car across the street. A phone lit up. A call connected. A voice said, flat and unexcited, the voice of someone relaying information as precisely as they had received it. They survived. Moved to phase 2. The call ended. The car did not move. Inside the room, Zara looked at the window. Jae-min stood beside her bed, with his hands still in hers, and his eyes on the street, and his mind already 6 moves ahead, which was the only way he knew how to be. But there was a difference tonight, and they both felt it. A fine, structural difference, like a wall that has been rebuilt with different material and will hold differently than it did before. You should sleep, he said. You should sit down, she said. He looked at the chair beside the bed. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he has never once used for its intended purpose. Then he pulled it closer, with one hand, and sat down. And he kept her hand in his. The city moved through its quietest hours. The car across the street did not move. And neither did they. And that, right there, is where the real story begins. Because it was never about the curtain. It was never about the documents on the hospital tray. It was about 2 people who had built a wall between them, one careful silence at a time, and what it takes to decide, with a car outside in the dark and enemies already moving, to finally let that wall come down. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Zara should trust him? Do you think he deserves it? I want to read every single response. If you are new here, subscribe right now, because the stories on this channel do not let up. Share this with someone who needs to watch it from the beginning. Part 1 is right there. Start from the top. You will not regret it.